Superficial scribblings on sexism. Superficial scribblings on life. Who the fuck needs criticism? And I can always be right. Hello, something guys and gals. This is Something Guy 912 on the 20th and first Superficial Scribblings on Sexism into the new year. But of course, as I alluded to in my previous entry, we are still in the last current year. So Vox, yet another pro-feminist, pretty much feminist journalism site, decided that they were the ones to put to task this idea that feminism, hell, the regressive left had lost much grasp of control in 2016 with their Why Feminism Didn't Lose in 2016, which kind of speaks of how much they lost if you have to make an article with the rebuttal. It's like when feminists didn't clearly talk about the Cologne rape attacks during the very early parts of 2016, and then feminists made articles about how they totally did talk about rape attacks only when they were being called out for their hypocrisy. This is going to be a very, very long episode, not only because I want my 20th episode to be a doozy, but also this article in particular has about 5 different sub-headlines on top of the main headline. So grab some popcorn or some soda, prop your chair up, masturbate if you must. We're going in with both guns and a hand grenade. Donald Trump's presidential election victory and Hillary Clinton's loss was a devastating blow to feminism. America had a choice between its first woman president and an alleged sexual predator, between women's rights are human rights and grab them by the pussy, between telling our daughters they can do anything they want and telling them that anything can be done to them by powerful, entitled men. And yet somehow, feminism didn't lose 2016, right? Also, note the term alleged, because that's all you got. You know that Bill Clinton allegedly raped someone too, right? Does that mean that it's now true or a demonization of Hillary Clinton to be with someone who raped someone? Oh wait, that's right. It's only bad when it suits my narrative, because Trump totally didn't want his daughter Ivanka to run a successful business because he just sees women as objects, right? Because 51% of women didn't vote for the biggest misogynist ever, did they? We know which option America chose. We also know it would have chosen differently if one person, one vote were anything but a cruel joke under our electoral college system. But that's beside the point now. Yes, it is, because once again, having a popular vote only makes it so that major populated areas like California or New York get to decide our president. While they still have a major grasp of the electorate numbers in terms of the electoral college, they still don't get a monopoly on presidential choices. Also, it's funny considering that the states in question usually lean Democrat that feminists want to set up as popular vote only. However, freakishly contingent Trump's triumph, it forecloses a future feminist imagined at least for a long while, Michelle Goldberg argues at Slate. We're going to be blown backwards so far that this irredeemably shitty year may someday look like a lost feminist golden age. 2016, Goldberg writes, might go down as the year the feminist bubble burst. Is this like the feminist dark ages or something? I don't recall, especially considering that the man has yet to do anything besides repeal parts of Obamacare, which, while a good idea at the get-go, was a flawed system as it basically was another tax break for the wealthy. As for the feminist bubble bursting, yeah, it certainly did. Violently and angry, a many social justice warrior did destroy and chant about reality not curbing to their every need, and that will be forever what feminism truly is about. In some ways, it's hard to argue with her conclusion. Federal policy on women's issues is likely to become a train wreck over the next 4 years. From Congress to funding family planning services, to civil rights enforcers shrugging at rape on college campuses, to labor agencies dismantling the few protections there are against gender-based discrimination in the workplace. Okay, none of which are actually true, first off. A rape on those college campuses is a fiction at worst, and a big inflation of the problem at best, and the gender-based discrimination at the workplace, if any, would be something you could sue the company for, and of which is in our law books since 1964. But when actual rape does occur, on a large scale, from a migrant population contempt for Western laws, oh wait, that's just their culture. Oh, we turn a blind eye to it because we'd rather let people raped than have ourselves be called racist, even though said label is predicated on criminalizing people for committing a crime. What fucking hypocrisy. It's also a massive blow to morale, Goldberg argues, when an obviously qualified woman loses the presidency to such an obviously less qualified man, a blow that can't help but reverberate through the culture, changing our sense of what is possible for women. Qualified as in knowing what to do in the job or based on efficacy? Because I can tell you on an ethical scale, Hillary is most certainly not qualified. Why does a Secretary of State need a private email server unless she has some juicy details that would incriminate her legitimacy as president, huh? And I keep hearing this glass ceiling nonsense be peddled around when the glass ceiling is not whether or not a woman does get presidency or not, rather, can a woman run for president, which is a resounding yes. Goldberg says her nightmare scenario is a new anti-feminist backlash of a kind we haven't seen since the Reagan years. She fears the dawn of an era in which men who have been stewing about political correctness can start mistreating women with even more impunity. Oh, yeah, that's exactly what the backlash came from, right? That it was a bunch of entitled men who didn't want to relinquish some of their privilege, right? It wasn't that third wave feminism became so toxic in how it affects media that was completely fine until feminism created problems out of thin air just superficially solved. It wasn't entitled women who knew they had privilege and wanted more special treatment for nothing else but principle, right? Feminism cooled the hatred towards their ideology by being more dogmatic and pissing in the wind than right-wing conservatism in said Reagan years. But of course, this religious ideology always is predicated on maintaining a victim narrative. Part of me shares those fears. Backlashes to social progress are real, and they happen with depressing regularity. But honestly, I have a hard time seeing this particular nightmare, men feeling any more entitled to women's bodies than normal, or feminism being any more credibly blamed for all the women's problems than normal coming to pass. Who, in their right mind, blames all women's problems on feminism? I don't blame feminism for women bleeding from their vaginas. I don't blame feminism for women being on their period. I don't blame feminism for women not being a majority demographic in certain fields of study. I blame feminism for that. All these things are the reason that women should get a step up over men, pursuing special snowflakes through pure biological circumstance and numbers games. Most of this shit is sophistry anyway. You couldn't pull me just one person who feels entitled to women's bodies other than Trump, and it's not like he says that under the idea that the women are not consenting. Clearly, he's implying that women, like successful men who make a career out of themselves, and sorry to say this, they do. Yes, feminist hopes have been dashed, but feminist efforts haven't failed. The only bubble that's been popped is the one that had some people convinced misogyny was already over, or at least well on its way out the door. Jesus fucking Christ. No one on this world thinks misogyny is over. Most people think misogyny isn't as intrusive or on a worldwide scale as you'd like to think it is. And most of these people point to problems that actually are misogynistic in nature, but since they don't happen in the first world, Western world, better off world, they're not your problem, right? A bubble that they get popped is that you have cried wolf, in this case misogyny, so many times that when something misogynistic does happen, people decry it as just another feminist bloviating the problem. But guess what? That is on you for trivializing a term that should be used so lightly as helium. There are some deeply painful losses in the ongoing battle for women's rights and equality this year. There's no way around that. There's no way around the weasel words that I peddled to superficially stem some kind of non-existent problem. But Trump's victory didn't vanquish feminism. It just clarified the challenges that feminism is really up against. Even now, still, in America in 2016, and the important part is this, 2016 proved that feminism is up to the challenge, and it's steadily winning battles in a very, very long war against something even bigger than Trumpism. In what way, and how so? You think that feminism really won if Hillary became president, which I still think wouldn't be true because Hillary is so disingenuous in her beliefs that her calling herself a feminist is just a means to get votes by useful idiots like yourself. And more to the point, nothing has happened in Trump's campaign. He wants to repeal Obamacare, which is most certainly flawed, and I disagree with the approval, but it is his power to do so. As for abortion, he can't overturn Roe v. Wade unless he enacts an amendment that says that abortion is illegal. Good luck doing that, even with a majority Republican House and Senate. 2016 was still a year of reckoning for men who act with secular impunity. For one man, Trump, and it didn't sink his candidacy, despite what some would believe. What about the sexual impunity that migrants get in foreign countries because their skin is slightly darker than mine, huh? Whoops, that's racist for me to call them out for their inherent privilege. 2016 did, sadly and predictably, keep up humanity's thousands-year trend of men committing sexual violence against women or otherwise behaving badly. Jezebel has a whole list of men who got away with it in 2016, where it ranges from criminal mischief to domestic violence to genocide, and where the men in question are all famous and still basically doing just fine for themselves. Yeah, I'm not going to take a modicum of legitimacy to what amounts to confirmation bias to hate on men. Yes, men do bad things because we are human beings. To assume that men just do bad things because of their sexual orientation or because they have an X and a Y rather than two X's is fucking ridiculous. How about if I make a list of women doing bad things and attribute what I said to it being because they were women wholesale? That would really fly with people, right? But of course, what kind of world we live in where demonizing men for the acts of some is seen as some kind of moral crusade for sex-negative man-haters like Vox or Jezebel? But some of them didn't get away with it, at least not entirely, and the reasons for that are reason for feminists to be optimistic. It's getting a little easier for victims of sexual violence to come forward, it seems, and it's getting a little harder for perpetrators to escape consequences. Because guilty before it is proven innocent, right? Let's get the Salem witch trials working round the clock. It only failed the first time because it was perpetrated more to women. If we do it to the men, it will work swimmingly, right? And as if to say that victims of said violence haven't been free to open up about the crimes prior, that this progressive feminism somehow opened a gateway for victims to open up, and not a precedent where people who actually have not experienced sexual violence are given free rein to make accusations with impunity, you fucking dishonest hacks. Former Fox News CEO Roger Ailes became former, not to mention disgraced, thanks to the determined efforts of Gretchen Carlson, the former Fox anchor who sued Ailes for sexual harassment, secretly taped his advances, which Ailes still denies making, for a year, and inspired numerous other women to go public about similar experiences with him. While I'm pretty sure that Roger Ailes did sexually harass women during his lifetime, this is not some big call of feminism, or is it a glaring word of misogyny prevalent? It's one guy being an asshole and having his way with women regardless of advances. A rotten apple of a tree doesn't spoil the tree. There were limits to this feminist victory. Carlson may have gotten a $20 million settlement and an apology from Fox, but Ailes got a $40 million golden parachute. And why, may I ask, did Ailes get said parachute? Was it something completely irrelevant to the court case and maybe it was a gift given to him by a cohort? Carlson faced public skepticism from her colleagues and attacks on her character, like so many women who go public about sexual conduct. No, like how most people go public about any misconduct. What you think is people denying women's experiences is people having a healthy amount of skepticism. If I were to claim that Anita Sarkeesian raped me in the ass with Jonathan McIntosh's 3-inch dick, people want to see proof of that occurring. Timestamps, where and when, how the circumstances led up to the rape. Listen and believe isn't going to cut around these parts, especially when more claims of rape are occurring with the mentality to shame and slander. And how are ordinary women with ordinary support networks supposed to feel about coming forward when even a popular TV personality like Carlson is only vindicated after a year of dedicated groundwork? And only after an even more famous colleague, Megyn Kelly, also comes forward to back her up. We may have a gender wage gap of 80 or so cents on the dollar, but when it comes to public receptions of sexual violence, we'll be lucky when a woman's word is worth 80% of a man's. Holy fucking shit. You seriously believe what the radical Muslims believe when it comes to two women having to bring up the same case against a man to every man bringing their defense, don't you? No. Megyn probably did that to vouch that Carlson wasn't lying because these two women are in top positions on Fox and they perhaps want a raking of Ailes' net worth. Now, that's not to say that's the only reason, but it is perfectly plausible for women to make claims of rape or harassment for financial gain. Just look at the professional victims like Anita Sarkeesian or Zoe Quinn. Their net worths are predicated on stirring the victim pot before it stews lukewarm. Or better yet, let's go back to my example earlier. If someone like, say, Sargon of Akkad were present during my rape, and people were obviously doubtful of my claim, he'd step up and say that he was present during the event, and vouch that what I was saying was true. Again, people are doubtful because Sargon does ideologically clash with people like Anita, and ideologically sides with me, so there is a possibility that he is lying and that he's picking sides, but no one ever in this scenario completely denies the case outright. Nonetheless, Ailes was one of the most powerful men in media. He made Fox News what it is today. It was never, ever a foregone conclusion that he could be taken down at all by something like this, much less that he'd lose his job over it. Yeah, because claims of rape or sexual harassment are very demonstrable claims, even if they turn out not to be true, which is why a lot of feminists do it, to undermine anything someone says and ruin their fucking careers over it, despite none of it ever coming to light. Other high-profile cases of sexual misconduct in 2016 came with similarly mixed but still powerful feminist victories. Bill Cosby's accusers were ignored for years until a male comedian said something in 2014. But in 2016, Cosby faced criminal charges, which he may or may not be convicted of, but there's damning evidence against him, and his reputation is in the toilet. This case I have greater doubts on. These women wait a number of years before coming with their claims about harassment, not when it actually occurred. The same goes for the Ailes harassment claims, although I have less reason to doubt those. If you wait 20 or so years to charge someone with sexual harassment after they've done it, it's safe to say that they are lying or the charge itself is now irrelevant. Former Stanford student and convicted rapist Brock Turner only served 3 months of his 6-month jail sentence, but after his victim's eloquent plea for justice went viral, his light sentence became a national scandal. It couldn't be that Brock got out early for good behavior, right? Something that a lot of people in jail can receive if they don't act out during their sentence. And I think you might be equating eloquent with shrill, because to me this sounds like someone not quite satisfied with Brock's punishment, despite him being punished for it. As for Donald Trump, well, he won the election. But while many voters were able to overlook his blatant misogyny, that doesn't mean they liked or approved of it. No, it simply was that it wasn't there. 51% of white women voted for Trump, so either they didn't care that he was a misogynist, or that him being a misogynist wasn't fucking true, and was a label you ran to the fucking grave and will run for the next 4 years that he is in office. The Access Hollywood tapes, and the many women who came forward after that to accuse Trump of sexual assault, dealt a huge blow to his campaign, one that only the last-minute chaos of FBI Director Dan Comey's letter about Hillary Clinton's emails could really help him recover from. Because FBI details showing that Hillary Clinton rigged the primaries to her favor and put Trump as the punching bag to beat on the general election. That she has a private and public opinion, that she was given the questions to the debates before the debates happened, is less incriminating to a career than Trump saying, "Grab her by the pussy," 11 years ago. If anything, that smear of Trump only humanized him more in the people's eyes. The sexual assaults, by the way, dropped weeks after they were made. But that's irrelevant. The claim is proof of the claim, people! All of these major stories have one thing in common: women's voices, amplifying and being amplified by other women's voices. One woman speaking out, inspiring a dozen others to follow suit because they know they're not alone. One woman speaking out and changing the story we tell about a powerful man, in public, instead of the usual whispered warning to other women behind closed doors, or the usual ashamed silence. Usual. Many. Often. These weasel words are great to use when you haven't a specific detail in mind about ashamed silence or whispered warning. Where were those voices amplified at the Cologne rapes? Oh yeah, they were spent amplifying the rape hysteria in the West in favor of actual rapes occurring. I'm going to keep bringing this up to show you how regressive and backwards feminism truly is. More women are speaking out, and more people are listening to them. This is a new normal that can't easily be reversed. Which I hope it will, because all it's doing is making claims of rape and harassment more dismissed by those who think it's just another crazy feminist nut job trying to get her 15 minutes of fame. But it's the feminists themselves who have to reverse this, and as long as it works in their favor, they certainly won't. Perhaps more than ever, 2016 was the year of women both speaking out and being heard. This doesn't seem like too much to ask for, but it's also not something we can take for granted. Yep, surely we can't, because why not have a world where false accusations are the norm and guilty before innocent is a recommended form of court justice? Justice is blind? Not social justice is not. In just the past decade or so, feminism has become mainstream, culturally hip, and politically savvy. Beyonce, for instance, has made feminism both appealing, think the feminist sign at the 2014 Video Music Awards, and challenging, think the proud black feminism of her 26 album Lemonade, to mainstream audiences. Oh yeah, I'm sure Beyonce, somebody who has had a successful, profitable career years before this said feminism became hip, really had trouble marketing her new album that was more to do with personal struggles than the struggles of all women. Because feminism is self-serving underneath all the calls of being for the other women. Notice how quiet Beyonce got once the years rolled in and feminism became more of a hate campaign as it proceeded to run without being challenged. Feminism, to her producers, was just a cheap novelty, like a fucking soda can. Not some great big call, and its product has worn off. Maybe that feminist thinking cap of yours is collecting dust too. In 2016, women's magazines like Cosmopolitan and Glamour ran election stories that any other outlet would consider major scoops, and some people on the internet seemed shocked that Teen Vogue would feature hard-hitting coverage of the 2016 election and not just beauty tips. Are people really surprised that top magazines would make slight election coverage for one of the most politically divisive elections since Bush and Gore? Also, how exactly is this feminist in any light, unless you mean to say that they weigh heavily towards Clinton because vagina? Aren't these the same magazines as sex-negative feminists call sexist because they tell women how to dress and conduct themselves around people, and most often or not, and display inaccurate body representations? You can't just simply apply yourself to a magazine that you yourself have decried just because it gets on your good side on one instance. But none of this is surprising, as Sadie Doyle explained for Quartz. The rise of feminist blogs during the George W. Bush years ended up training an army of female journalists and editors who now write for major outlets like the New York Times or have found their home at successful new digital publications. Even though it still gets dismissed and made fun of, feminist news coverage has gone mainstream. Feminist coverage is laughed at because it's dishonest, disingenuous, and overall preachy in its appeal. It's a new religion, where instead of fearing Satan, it's fearing patriarchy. It comes to the conclusion and finds facts that support it rather than looking at the facts and making a conclusion based on those facts. But it being relevant to Bush's election is fucking ludicrous. I cannot recall, even going back in my naive 8-year-old brain, of any heavy-handed feminist articles. It's only been in the last 5 years that I have most certainly noticed these heavy-handed articles taking hold. I'm not saying that feminism was completely non-existent during the 2000s, but it most certainly wasn't taken seriously and was attributed as the extreme minority, much like the neo-Nazis and the KKK. Most of what I can remember from Bush's election was a huge call of a deconstruction of the military-industrial complex and the religiosity of the politics at the time. No wonder, then, perhaps, that decades of rape allegations against Bill Cosby didn't even begin to catch up with him until late 2014, or that this year featured a broader cultural reckoning on sexual assault, or that Hillary Clinton decided to vocally embrace her gender and feminist values in 2016 after having done the opposite in 2008. Yes, because Hillary Clinton has a public and private opinion, you fucking retard. Hillary Clinton will literally believe anything just so long as she gets your vote. You are a useful idiot in that you will side with somebody who says they are ideologically tied to you without any forethought into what exactly she is going to do for you in the fucking government. Of course, Hillary is going to believe this nonsense when she didn't before. It's political gain to get her in the White House, and thank fuck she didn't. As for Bill Cosby, once again, I find it doubtful that he did do it, and that the people didn't bring it up when it was relevant makes the case irrelevant. Social media has also given women huge platforms in communities to discuss problems they might otherwise have stayed silent about, or that they may never have found the words for until someone gave it a name. Ugh! They have always had their fucking platforms. There's a difference between having a platform and being set up on a pedestal for nothing else but what the platform is based on. That people can't decry feminism for what it is lest someone in the movement get triggered to a pretentious fetal position and cry all the labels that deflect their own personal flaws and lack of accountability. These platforms are infantilizing women, making them emotionally weak, and that they're ready to pull the gender card when it suits them. Is that really making women strong in some way? When Trump's pussy tape inspired author Kelly Oxford to tweet about her first sexual assault and encouraged other women to do the same, she was inundated with responses at the rate of at least one per second for at least the next day. And when I wrote about her tweets, women I know started telling me about the experience they kept to themselves for years. Tell me, Sister Judah, how do you experience the Lord Jesus Christ through thine eyes in these trying times? That's pretty much what it sounds like to me. Different people lying to each other, being convinced of their lies. There are many reasons, stigma, shame, trauma, and so on, why women might not talk openly about assault, even though it's so common, but we've also been raised to expect that this kind of thing happens all the time, that it's no big deal if a guy casually gropes you at a bar, or that it's flattering if he gives you a kiss you weren't expecting, that the sick, hollow feeling you might get about it afterward is your problem. No, it's only your problem if you assume that every person is out to get you. If you actually get groped, if you actually get harassed, you demonstrate evidence for it, and then don't try to use it as a defense mechanism for your arguments, we can then safely say it's not your problem. If anything, trauma is the only reason women don't talk about being raped or harassed. They don't want to be reminded of it. But I am sure that Zoe Quinn triggers each time she reminds everyone of the harassment campaign that was Gamergate, after she gets a nice check in the mail for her professional victimhood. Feminism has raised other women under the idea that they should be constantly afraid of being groped, evidenced by the rape hysteria at the college campuses, because ideologies run on fear. As long as you are afraid, you have a reason to side with them, just like how Christianity runs on the fear of not going to heaven. If you get enough women in a room to talk about this, though, they might start realizing that all have the same problem. They might give that problem a name like sexual assault and decide there's no good reason to put up with it anymore. So if you look at a woman, that's sexual assault, right? If you deny sex to a woman, that's rape, right? Maybe you should look at what the actual word means instead of deciding to change definitions like colors. They might even start naming and stop tolerating some of the small indignities that make even the most privileged female lives taxing, as Goldberg puts it. Like mansplaining, a man condescending to a woman on a subject she knows better than he does, or manspraying when men take up too much space on a subway, e.g. and crowd others out. Yeah, manspreading and mansplaining. Not the most dismissive terms to any man who have to spread their legs because of their genitals, or someone explain to some shrieking harpy like you why he didn't actually rape you with his mind. How exactly do you know that a woman knows more than a man? And why exactly is it based on the gender? How sexist would I be that I would call someone like you a womansplainer, condescendingly talking to me about a subject that I know more about because I'm a man and I'm so much better? It's equally as sexist the other way around. Makes no difference what bullshit, power plus privilege nonsense you peddle. Can this get a little ridiculous or trivial? Perhaps. Then again, it's not like sexism saves itself for the really weighty, serious issues. Sometimes misogyny is actually so ridiculous, so absurd, that the only sensible response is blowing raspberries and laughing in its face. Lord knows we'll all be going to need a little levity under Trump. It's almost like you can take a break from feminism, and it's almost like said misogyny is actually not fucking real and is only a deference to make someone like yourself feel like a victim at any opportune moment, right? Systemic sexism depends on silence. People who will look the other way, or will shut up these loud women who don't have the courtesy to shut themselves up. But once silences are broken, as widely and deeply as they have been for women this year, this decade, it's very hard to pull all of that back in the bottle. It also depends on who's telling the truth and who's lying, because the more the lie gets told, the more dismissive people will be on the truth. So I thank you for trivializing rape and sexual assault, that people are actually victims of it will never be heard. Thank you for fucking increasing the speech volume of disingenuous hacks who use victimhood as an excuse for their poor character and merits. In 2016, loud women fought off an extreme abortion ban in Poland, led a fierce fight against the Dakota Access Pipeline, and smacked down the idea that women should never be embarrassed about their periods. Loud women planned a massive march on Washington for the day after Trump's inauguration that could be the largest ever mobilization of its kind. Women just aren't shutting up, and it's hard to see why they should start now. Okay, good for you in Poland, but what about women's rights in Islam? Oh yeah, that's right, it's just their culture. But the rape culture in this Western world needs to be rocked on its side, apparently. Also, periods are a bit embarrassing. Women don't like to talk about it like they got a new pet dog. As for the March on Washington, it's once again based on this idea that Trump is some kind of misogynist when 51% of white women voted for him despite the claim. Doesn't mean that validates their claims. There was a lot of Tea Party people marching after Obama won the presidency, and they have the right to do so, but their screeching of Obama being a secret Muslim doesn't validate said claims because a lot of people believe so. The near future of feminism will be local and decentralized. That doesn't mean it won't be effective. I think it will be. The Westboro Baptist Church was local and decentralized, and look how well it's doing. It's exactly what it is, with no pretense of being some kind of equality movement. Less and less people are identifying with feminism, and feminism has lost all sense of purpose, becoming a self-fulfilling ideology that will make up problems to keep its existence alive. It's important to remember that women still made historical national electoral gains despite Hillary Clinton's loss. The number of women of color in the Senate is about to quadruple from 1 to 4, plus the symbolic milestone of Clinton's campaign, the first woman presidential nominee of a major party who won the popular vote by about 3 million votes, really does matter despite her loss, and is in some ways a feminist triumph. Are you serious? Okay, Hillary Clinton was not the first female presidential nominee, not even in this election. Apparently, 2008 is not existent to make this claim to you, or 1872 with Victoria Woodhull, or 1972 with Shirley Chisholm. Nope. Hillary Clinton is literally the only woman to have run for president, even though 44 years ago, a black woman ran for president, just a few years after the Civil Rights Movement. As for the black people in Senate, how does having black people in your Senate help with the quality of referring to laws or edicts? Oh yeah, it doesn't. It's just a neat little tool for people like you to pressure those with arbitrary diversity quotas when character and merit are what people care for. By the way, I'm sure those two women probably have better principles than Hillary Clinton ever had, because I bet they didn't run their campaign on principle of being a woman. Of course, a majority Republican Congress and a Trump-Pence administration don't bode well for advancing women's health rights at the federal level. But there's tremendous opportunity and energy for progressives and feminists to make some serious gains at the state and local level in the meantime, which also happens to be a much better long-term organizing strategy than obsessing over presidential politics. Hey, possibly the best advice this piece of shit article has made, even though it's still suggesting more feminist pressure on the lower levels. As for advancing biological rights, there are indeed pro-life feminists who got kicked out by pro-abortion feminists for not being the right kind of feminist. So what exactly is a woman's right to you exactly? Roe v. Wade can't be overturned by Trump. He has to make a new amendment to do so, and if he is going to, good luck in him having a second term in the office. 2016 was the best year yet in a promising fight to pass paid sick and family leave at the state and local level. The United States is the only developed country that doesn't have national paid maternity leave, and the momentum to change that, at least locally, as long as Congress does nothing, is strong. 3 states, 1 county, and 10 cities passed laws in 2016 that require workers to be able to earn paid sick days, and New York State and Washington, D.C. both passed very generous family leave insurance programs. I have no idea what any of this has to do with feminism losing or winning, but I guess Yahoo. And amazingly, reproductive rights may actually be on the upswing, in spite of everything, including a prod from Trump to appoint pro-life Supreme Court justices who could overturn Roe v. Wade. About time you actually bring up that court case. They can't overturn it unless an amendment making abortion illegal is to be ratified. And as I've said prior, even with the majority Republican Senate and House, it's going to be a hard thing to do. The Supreme Court's decision this summer to overturn 2 Texas abortion laws was a sweeping pro-choice game-changer, as already been used to strike down abortion restrictions in other states, and more court victories will probably follow in the near future. That decision also makes it much less likely that the court will overturn Roe v. Wade in the near future, at least not unless and until Trump gets to appoint 2 or 3 new conservative justices. How is it you can keep convincing yourself that with the addition of new conservative justices, that will completely destroy Roe v. Wade? Trump himself has to enact an amendment to do that, not the Supreme Court justices. I guess checks and balances don't matter none when you have a narrative to push. Collectively, states also propose about 300 bills that would expand rather than restrict women's health and rights, including better access to contraception and better maternal health care. It's a promising avenue to shore up women's health at a time when comprehensive coverage under the Affordable Care Act could be in jeopardy. Then might I ask, What is it with all the screeching about Trump destroying women's rights prior? Was that just cloud rings and fairy tales that you tell yourself at night to justify having to sucker punch a white man? There's also at least one interesting and very promising state and local side effect of Hillary Clinton's loss. She was reportedly inspiring a massive surge of interest among women in running for local political office. Driven by shock, fear, and anger over Trump's win, many women say they want to be the change they want to see in government. Well, good for them. At least those women are out and doing something for a change, instead of demanding they be given the change by precept. But what does that say about you, the one journalist who is cooking up conspiracy theories in the crock pot? That's incredibly important. Research shows that women's political ambition, or lack thereof, is one of the biggest hurdles to getting more women in political office and working toward equal representation in government. Some women are qualified and driven, but have just literally never considered running for office as a serious possibility. Others feel intimidated by fears of sexism on the campaign trail, or don't feel supported by their political establishment. I wonder who has been peddling this fear of sexism. I'll give you a hint. It starts with an F and ends in feminism. Either way, there's a lack of qualified women in the pipeline to advance in political office, and if more women run and win, especially at the state and local level, they will not only set themselves up for more powerful offices later, they'll also change how their government works. Exactly, but there's a particular word that you have glossed over: qualified. See, people like qualified people, and if women aren't qualified, then unfortunately, you'll never get an equal split of demographic in office. Like as if that equal split even matters in the first place, as there should be a diversity of thought rather than the diversity of identity. With someone like Trump in office, it's much harder to argue that sexism is a thing of the past. That's a good thing. Wait, hold on. Let me get my tinfoil hat on. Much better. Okay, roll the conspiracy theory reel. It's tempting to think of these developments as the start of a sea change, the last stand of the good old boys who used their power to abuse women with impunity and trust that everybody else would look the other way, for instance. But we shouldn't start writing rape culture's obituary just yet. Holy fucking shit. This is some serious Alex Jones shit we are getting into here. They're putting something in the word to make the men sexist. Younger generations may be more liberal than older ones in general, but research suggests that they're not necessarily more progressive on issues related to gender equality and sexism. While there's been some progress on these issues, the sexism that remains can actually be more dangerous because people will be less prepared to believe it really exists and thus less equipped to deal with it. You know what exactly makes people believe that sexism doesn't exist? When people like you define it as having to talk to men in public or dealing with discourse of men when I clearly know more than they do. That's how. Not this made-up research of people not tying to your ideological line. Although it is nice to point out that the younger generations are the ones who are acting like spoiled brats because not everything they want is being spoon-fed to them. Thanks for making a mockery out of liberalism, fuckwad. In a 2013 Pew survey of Americans, for instance, millennial men were the most likely demographic group to say that all necessary changes have already been made to bring about gender equality in the workplace. That's nuts. Women face workplace discrimination in almost every imaginable way, from the very real gender wage gap to pregnancy and parenting discrimination to unequal representation in leadership, to America's complete lack of any national paid maternity or family leave. Do women who face workplace discrimination facing that because they are women or because of other factors? Are you under the idea that any kind of hardship women face is an affront to gender equality, or that the men in question only think that gender equality is based on not any one woman ever having to deal with any difficulty in the workplace? See, this is the emotional weakness propulsion that you keep lampooning into these women. You are making them incapable to deal with even the faintest little problem unless they need their shoulder to cry on. As for the wage gap, if women were actually getting paid less than men per hour for the same job and for the same hours, guess what? Men would be out of job. Corporations would be stupid not to hire someone that they could pay less to do the same work, you fucking retard. And yet, look at the number of women in full-time and part-time jobs despite said gender gap. And for the pregnancy and parenting discrimination, how do you know that a job didn't hire a woman because of the possibility of them being pregnant? Unless you can demonstrate it, you can't sue the company for some invisible bias against you. And that is something you can do because even though women face workplace discrimination, apparently, we have laws that levy that as a crime. But complacency in the face of all that could be tougher when your president is the kind of guy who thinks his own daughter should change jobs if she were ever sexually harassed at work. The same guy of which, mind you, considered giving up his business to once he ran for office because, he just hates his daughter so much that he would be proud of what a successful, self-made businesswoman like herself is. That someone with the opportunity to make it big in the United States and took it, despite what may come, and never stooped so low to use her genitals as an excuse to be put into positions of power, would be looked up to by the hugest misogynists in the fucking world. Give me a fucking break. I think of the status quo on sexism, racism, and other forms of bigotry as like living in a town built on top of a toxic waste dump. The barrels aren't as well sealed or deeply buried as people think, and your kids are still getting sick, and still only certain kinds of crops will actually grow in that soil. But city officials insist everything's fine, and really you should count your blessings, because in the next town over, somebody has to wear gas masks. I'm sure this analogy would work if the toxic barrels were present and not some made-up hodgepodge like you have construed, and in order to demonstrate that it exists, you actually go and get some toxic barrels and toss them in the town to purposefully pollute it so you can make said claim. That's the status quo of sexism we have here. But then one day, Hurricane Donald comes along, it roars through and rips up the grass and soil, and all the barrels bob to the surface and ooze toxic black goo everywhere, the stuff you thought and hoped he was long buried. He's gonna rock those liberals like a hurricane, apparently. Also, whereas Donald tried to cover up his sexism exactly, he very clearly explained himself that the Hollywood Access video in question was just him doing jock talk, a dick measuring contest to other dude bros. It's a much bigger and more obvious mess, and nobody's happy, but at least nobody's fooling themselves anymore, and you know just how much hard cleanup work is still ahead. We're expecting cleanup on aisle feminism, because this aisle has convinced itself that the floors are falling in on themselves, and in order to do so, dig through the floors until they come out the other fucking end and declare that yes, the floor is indeed falling. Not that we made it so by faulty to make said claim, not that our entire movement wouldn't exist if not to perpetuate this invisible sexism. The floor is falling, and you should be afraid. That way you'll side with us. And holy shit, that is it. There are no comments on this article, and even there were, this episode has gone on too long. So long, everybody.